All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. It is time for our annual 2025-2026 NBA Contender Rankings. This is intended to be more of a quick breakdown of my contender rankings. We did in-depth season previews of all 30 NBA teams. You can find those earlier on our YouTube channel feed, but I want to kind of just break the teams down into tiers to give you guys an idea of where I think these teams stand strictly within the context of the ability to contend for an NBA championship. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's doing incredible work on our social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Make sure you guys follow us over there. And last but not least, keep dropping those mailbag questions in the YouTube comments, and we will hit them in our mailbags throughout the remainder of the season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So again, just going to list these teams into three different tiers. I'm going to have a top 10, but I'm also going to go beyond the top 10 because I want to kind of go through the top three tiers of teams, starting from the third tier being teams that have just the ever slightest hope of maybe kind of sort of putting our name in the hat to win a championship. More just an acknowledgement of the really good teams in the NBA. Then the second tier, which is going to be teams that have a real shot, but it's a long shot, right? And then the top tier, your traditional championship contenders that check all of the boxes. So we're going to actually work from the top down today. With our top tier contenders, there are only two teams that I have in this tier, Denver and Oklahoma City. These are the teams that check every single box that you need for legitimate championship contention. I wanted to kind of go over that concept a little bit. So first of all, I think you need either a supreme talent advantage, like the 2024 Boston Celtics, or you need a bona fide top tier superstar, one of those four dudes at the top of the league right now. In our player rankings, that was Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Those four guys, I think you either need one of those or, like Boston, five dudes who would make $30 million on the open market. In this case, both Denver and Oklahoma City check that box through Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think you need a transcendently great unit, a side of the floor where you're as good or better than anyone else in the NBA. I think Denver has that on offense. And I think Oklahoma City has that on defense. I think your other unit needs to be resilient enough for it not to undercut the success of your other unit. Denver has shown the ability, even after bad regular seasons, to be as good on defense as they need to be to win when the time comes. Oklahoma City was an elite regular season offense, but as we went over in our season preview, they were a really bad offense in their losses, generally an inconsistent playoff offense. But to be clear, they were good enough on that end of the floor when they needed to be. I think you need depth. You need to be able to survive the 82-game grind and be prepared for 4 2-week playoff series. You need to have enough talent to not have to wear out your best players during that stretches so that they're breaking down in the playoffs. For instance, Golden State, waiting so long to make a trade, wearing Steph Curry out. He pulls a hammy for the first time in his career in a second-round playoff series. Denver last year, they weren't deep enough. They were leaning a lot on some key guys. Aaron Gordon had to play more perimeter defense than ever before. Guys were breaking down, especially Aaron Gordon, when they got into that series. This year, Denver addressed that depth. In addition to getting in a player that is going to prevent Aaron Gordon from having to guard on the perimeter as much, in general, they should be able to keep everybody's minutes down relative to where they were. That should put them in a better position to handle the 82-game grind. And Oklahoma City is both deep and young, which is obviously going to set them up well for that situation. And lastly, I think you need to be devoid of a crippling weakness. Winning 4 rounds will almost certainly put you in front of different types of great teams. And when you face different types of great teams, one of them is probably going to be able to expose your biggest weakness. For instance, Luka Doncic as a perimeter defender. In previous rounds, he didn't have to guard in space as much. They were able to produce enough defense to win, right? Boston, though, a team that was truly able to space Luka Doncic out, all of a sudden, his inability to contain the ball in the perimeter became a crippling weakness for that Dallas team. For example, I think Luka will need to become a better defender in order to ever lead what we would consider to be a bona fide top tier championship contender that is utterly devoid of a crippling weakness. It remains to be seen if conditioned Luka will be that kind of guy in the future, right? That's a question mark for that Lakers team. But like maybe it's you have a coach that is a mistake prone coach that doesn't play to the team's strengths that could cost you a series, or maybe it's a very flawed player in your best lineups that could be a breaking point. Rudy Gobert for Minnesota's offense against truly elite defenses is an example of this type of weakness, right? Neither Oklahoma City nor Denver has a crippling weakness like that. To be clear, I still think you can win a championship if you have a flaw or two in one of those categories I just listed, but your margin for error becomes much smaller. And I think that's where you dip into second tier contention when you have a question mark in one or two of those areas. That's where you need favorable stuff to happen for you. You need to catch a good matchup. You need some luck, right? But Denver and Oklahoma City are the only two teams in the entire NBA this year that I think check all of those boxes for bona fide top tier championship contender. My number one team in my championship contenders this year is the Denver Nuggets. So I have Oklahoma City and Denver on equal footing in this tier, to be clear. But the reason why I'm giving Denver the slight nod stems from the simple fact that I think Denver matches up really well with Oklahoma City. There are some very specific reasons why an inferior version of this Denver team last year managed to push Oklahoma City to the brink. They have the best player in the series, Nikola Jokic. And yes, Oklahoma City did play him into some rough games, but generally speaking, he was the one offensive player who was able to consistently generate great shots for his team against that Oklahoma City defense. They struggled to pay those shots off at times where the depth and talent will help this year, but Nikola Jokic was able to break down Oklahoma City's defense. And two, Denver is just the kind of high IQ defense that can make Oklahoma City uncomfortable by forcing them to think. They had to methodically break them down possession by possession against different coverages, making good decisions, making long jump shots. Essentially, Denver does a good job of playing Oklahoma City into their weaknesses. And this Denver team is much deeper and much more talented than they were last year. They played a series tomorrow. I would pick Denver to win in 6 or 7 games. And that is why Denver is my championship favorite at this point. Now, for Oklahoma City, the case lies in internal improvement. I'm not saying there's some massive gap here. I think it's incredibly close. And if they get that type of internal improvement, they absolutely can beat Denver and become the first repeat champion since the 2018 Warriors. I said I'd pick Denver to win a series that starts tomorrow. We don't know where Shai or J-Dub or Chet will be as basketball players by the time late May comes around. A lot can change for all three of those guys. If they stand pat or only make very minor improvements, I think they're going to lose to Denver. If they make substantial improvements, they're going to hoist the trophy again. That's their pathway. For me, I'm looking at Denver because I like the matchup with Oklahoma City. It's the best player in the league with the best roster he's ever had. As much as I like that Oklahoma City team, I think they're still a couple years away from being just like a every season we're the very best playoff team and we're not going to lose but 4 or 5 playoff games in an entire playoff run. Like that's going to require some internal improvement for them to get to that point. Maybe they get there this year. Again, they're in that same tier with Denver. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Oklahoma City won, but I'm giving the slight edge to Denver based on the matchup and having the best player in the series. Second tier contenders. These are teams that are lacking in one or two of the key areas that I listed earlier, but they're strong enough overall to have a legit chance to win the title if things break their way. Like, what if Denver and Oklahoma City play each other in round 2 because Denver has a Jamal Murray injury and slips to the 4 seed. And suddenly Denver and Oklahoma City are playing in the second round and one of them gets knocked out. And what if you happen to match up really well with the other one? Or what if you're in the East and you only have to face one of those teams anyway? Or what if injuries go your way? You stay healthy all year, A couple of your key opponents do not. Maybe a key swing player on your team pops for you. That pathway exists. It's just a longer shot than the teams that are in the upper tier. That's what makes up this second tier of contenders. I have 7 teams in this tier. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. The NBA season is right around the corner, and we're incredibly excited. Haven't placed your first bet yet? Now is the perfect time. Bet $5, and if it wins, you don't just get your payout, you also cash in $150 in bonus bets on top. If you're looking to bet NBA futures, they're live on Hard Rock Bet. You can bet on the finals, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man, and a lot more. Open up the app to see everything that's live and lock in today's odds if you like what you see. And on Wednesdays, if you're already betting on the Hard Rock Sportsbook app, you know what that means. It's the last day to use your legendary rewards drops. Open up the app today. You can have a bonus bet, or who knows what's in there. More drops every Thursday. The rewards and promos are nonstop. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and make your first deposit. Number 3, and I think this is the team that is clearly the top of this tier because of circumstance, the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers check every box except for the top tier superstar box. They're deep. They have an elite unit. They were the only offense in the league last year to crack a 120 offensive rating. Obviously, their offense fell apart in the postseason, but as we talked about in our season preview, I'm a big believer that Darius Garland's turf toe was just a devastating type of injury for that type of offense that depended on his dribble penetration, right? Their defense is plenty good enough if their offense is clicking at its peak level. Again, they have the depth they need to survive the season, and they don't have a massive weakness. But the biggest part of it is they play in the East. That was ultimately what gave them the number 3 spot for me. The pathway is just so clear for Cleveland. They're already the best team in the East. The Knicks are the only team in the conference that really has the talent and veteran experience to challenge them. And the Knicks have literally underachieved constantly outside of the Celtics series since they traded for Karl Anthony Towns, right? So you win the East and you beat the battered remains of whoever survives the Western Conference. Specifically, I think Cleveland's combination of speed and shooting makes them a real upset threat against a team like Denver, who can struggle to guard teams that can really space them out and pick and roll. So win the East, pray for Denver to make it out of the West, upset Denver, you're hoisting the trophy. That clearly defines for me a pathway that I think makes them the obvious number 3 team on this list. Number 4, the team I'm sick of underrating, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Another team that checks most of the boxes. They have depth. They have an elite unit, their defense. Their other unit is plenty good enough, their offense. They just have 2 question marks. Will Ant make the leap to true superstardom this year? That will require him becoming a dependable night-to-night playoff scorer, not just against teams in the first and second round, but especially in the conference finals where he's ran into teams that have elite rim protection in addition to athletes that can match up with him. That is the barrier between Ant being the 5th best player in the league, who's the best player on the next tier, or the 5th best player in the league who's in that tier with the other 4 guys at the top of the league. The second question mark is Gobert. He's a big part of why they struggle against elite defense in the late rounds. He gums up the offense for him with his inability to catch and finish anything in traffic that isn't a wide open dunk. The pathway for the Wolves is Ant taking that leap, becoming that reliable night-to-night superstar regardless of opponent in the postseason, and I think they need to catch some favorable matchups. Unfortunately, with Gobert and the massive leap Ant needs to make, I don't think they can beat Oklahoma City as currently constructed. So they need Denver to drop to the 4 seed. They need Denver to beat Oklahoma City in round 2. Minnesota's had Denver's number for years now. They absolutely can upset them in a series. Then they're in the finals. They have a great chance to hoist the trophy. That's the pathway for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But the big fear for me with them is I'm having a really hard time even thinking of a way that they can beat the Oklahoma City Thunder in a playoff series. Number 5, the Los Angeles Lakers. They have 2 massive question marks. Their defense on paper doesn't appear close to good enough. In general, I don't think they're athletic enough overall as a basketball team. And they have 2 massive health question marks. 41-year-old LeBron James, and Marcus Smart, who hasn't been able to stay on the floor for 2 straight seasons. But they do check the other boxes pretty well. Luka Doncic is the only player in this tier of 7 teams that I consider to be a bona fide top-tier superstar. And I think he's poised for the best season of his career. So that gives the Lakers kind of like an ace in the hole that the other teams in this tier do not have. Like Luka absolutely could stare down Shai or Nikola Jokic in a series and outplay them. That feels very unlikely for any other star in this tier. Other guys like Anthony Edwards, Steph Curry, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Jalen Brunson, those guys could outplay those top dudes for a game or two, but you'd be shocked if they like outplayed Jokic or Shai for a whole series, right? Luka is that level of talent, and that's what makes the Lakers different than the other teams in this tier. I do think they'll have a truly elite unit, their offense. I think they'll be in the 118 to 120 range with their offensive rating this year. And then with the additions of DeAndre Ayton, Marcus Smart, and Jake LaRavia, while only losing Dorian Finney-Smith out of their core rotation, that adds some much-needed depth to their rotation. The path just requires a lot to go right for them. They need this version of Luka in peak shape to be less of a defensive weak point, like we talked about earlier. They need Smart, Ayton, and LeBron to all stay healthy. And they need to find a way to be a mediocre defense, either through internal factors like health and just overall commitment down the roster, or what I think they need, which is a trade, a high-level perimeter athlete, someone along the lines of Andrew Wiggins, for example. One last note for the Lakers. I think they present some problems for both Denver and Oklahoma City, which makes them an upset threat. They can space Denver out and pick and roll with Luka Doncic, and they have the ability to attack Oklahoma City's lack of perimeter size with their big perimeter shot creators in LeBron and Luka. To be clear, I'd pick both teams against the Lakers at this point. I just think you need to be able to cause a real problem for a team in order to upset them. And the Lakers can present real problems to both of their teams. And we actually saw that bear out in regular season games last year. So again, bigger weaknesses than some of the other teams in this tier, but a bigger ace in the hole in the form of having a top-tier superstar that lands the Lakers at number 5. Number 6, the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers also check most of the boxes. They have an elite unit, their defense. Their offense is plenty good enough. They have real depth. It's older depth, but they do have real depth. They just have 2 big question marks. They don't have a top-tier superstar anymore. Kawhi failed to reach that level last year, even when he was healthy. And they have a crippling weakness in the form of James Harden and his annual playoff collapses, especially late in big series. The pathway for them is very simple. What happened with Kawhi in the Nuggets series has to be an outlier. He has to be able to get back to the level he was at in his previous playoff runs when he was healthy, when he was a legit bona fide top-tier superstar. If Kawhi can get there when the time is right in a big playoff series, then they suddenly vault up to top-tier contention. Because this is a really strong and well-built roster. They're deep with perimeter defense. They're very athletic. They've got rim protection in Zubats. Overall, it's just a very talented roster that is well-built for the modern NBA. They're well-coached. They've got a floor-raising offensive talent in the regular season in James Harden and a ceiling-raising offensive talent in Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs. It just requires Kawhi to be that ace in the hole the same way I was talking about Luka Doncic being for the Lakers. If Kawhi can get to that level, they vault all of these teams into that that 3 spot. But we've just been waiting on that with Kawhi for years, and it actually seems to be trending away from that rather than closer to that. Number 7, the Houston Rockets. Houston, to be clear, for me, had Fred VanVleet not gotten hurt, would have been at the bottom of the top tier of contenders for me in that number 3 spot. Because they would have checked all of the boxes really well. They wouldn't have had a top tier superstar, but I think they would have had a massive talent advantage over most teams. That roster was stacked when they were healthy. They would have had an elite unit, their defense. They'd be plenty good enough on offense when healthy. They would have depth. They wouldn't have any crippling weakness. The problem is the loss of Fred VanVleet just chops them right off at the knees in 2 key areas. It takes that talent advantage to something far less substantial, to where suddenly their lack of a true top-tier superstar would be more glaring. And it creates a crippling weakness, specifically a lack of ball handling. And I think that would just about guarantee a loss for them against a team like Oklahoma City. OKC in general was a team I was worried about for Houston. I think Chet is a super unique weapon to be able to deploy on someone like Kevin Durant in a playoff series. We saw more examples of that this summer in some of the one-on-one footage. And KD was hitting some super tough shots over Chet, but like Chet can make KD work in a way that many defenders can't. And even with Fred VanVleet, I think they would have struggled against Oklahoma City's ball pressure. But the loss of Fred VanVleet feels like a death sentence. So I have Houston down at 7 for now. But they're probably the most likely team out of any of these 7 teams in this tier to eventually jump up into the top tier. Because they're probably going to make a trade. And if they nail the right trade for the right ball handler, all of a sudden they vault right back up towards the top of this list. Number 8, the New York Knicks. A lot of question marks, but also a lot of upside, right? Like they had an elite offense in the regular season, but it fell apart against Indiana. And in order to win a championship, they're going to need Mike Brown to be able to find a way to make their offense resilient from round to round, depending on matchups, right? Their defense is more like a crippling weakness. As I've discussed, I think Cat is just too mistake prone to build a championship-capable defense around. In our season preview, we discussed some options there. Mike Brown's going to have his work cut out for him. They do not have a top-tier superstar or a supreme talent advantage, but I do think they have plenty of depth. So they need several key things to go right. They need Mike Brown to shore up the playoff offense. They need Mike Brown to make the defense with Cat work against the best teams in the league. But the reason why I have them on this list anyway, despite the fact that they have question marks on so many of these key championship contention categories, is because they're in the East. You get through Cleveland somehow, and you're right there in the finals. And again, like similar to what I talked about with Cleveland, if you catch Denver, a team that can struggle with spaced out pick and roll, they're at least an upset threat there. But all of those weaknesses have them towards the bottom of this tier. Lastly, at number 9, the Golden State Warriors. I actually think this Golden State team, when they're healthy, is clearly better than a team like the Knicks. But their age combined with a brutal Western Conference playoff field is what put them at the bottom for me. It's just going to be so hard for them to make it through 82 games and 3 playoff rounds against all teams that are likely going to be higher teams on this list, teams that we've already listed. But when they're healthy, to be clear, I'm very high on them as a basketball team. I'm a huge believer in Steph as the 3rd best offensive player in the entire NBA, even still at age 37. I think the Jimmy Horford, Draymond front court will be really good defensively when they're all healthy. And for all the talk about their age, it's more of just like a can those guys survive long enough to be what they need to be in the postseason? Like in the regular season context, I actually think Steve Kerr and that front office have always done a really nice job of finding good young players that can play regular season shifts. So like the age thing, it's less a depth for the regular season and more like if they ended up in a second round series against Oklahoma City or Denver, would Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, and Al all be at their relative ceilings at that point? And it's just a long shot for me. I'm a big believer in the team. I don't think it's a coincidence that they won as many games as they did after the Jimmy trade. They had an elite defense. The offense with Steph was plenty good enough. They had, again, that end of the rotation depth with young players. They had an elite coach. Ultimately, what prevents them from being a top-tier contender is their lack of top-end talent, right? Like, Steph is too old to be a bona fide top-tier superstar, and they certainly don't have a massive talent advantage. But what keeps them at the bottom of this second tier is a really bad combination of being in a brutal Western Conference with a very old core of players that's unlikely to survive the grind. But make no mistake, if those dudes somehow find themselves healthy in the big spots late in the season, you'd be foolish not to take them seriously, especially if Steph can get back to that like 27 points per game in the postseason, where then all of a sudden he's playing like a bona fide top-tier superstar. Those are the 9 teams that I think have a real shot. There's a third tier. These are all teams that are extreme long shots. I just more want to list these as what I consider to be the legitimately very good teams in the league that are beneath those top 2 tiers, either due to strong roster construction or a supremely gifted star player, right? I'm going to just list them, and then I'm going to give you guys who I'll pick as my 10th team, the team that's the top team in this tier. I have the Milwaukee Bucks, the Detroit Pistons, the Orlando Magic, the Atlanta Hawks, the Dallas Mavericks, the Miami Heat, the San Antonio Spurs, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Memphis Grizzlies. These are the teams that I'm putting in that third tier that I just want to shout out as really good basketball teams. If I had to pick a team from that list to round out the top 10 as being the best team from the third tier, it's going to be Milwaukee because of Giannis. Similar to what I was talking about with the Lakers, having one of the true top tier superstars in the league can make up for a lot of other issues. And Giannis is still very much one of those guys. The reason why I left them off the second tier is because they are rife with flaws once you get past Giannis. They are super light on talent compared to all of those teams. They have some gaping weaknesses in terms of aggregate ball handling, as well as perimeter defense and overall team speed and athleticism. So they have some massive flaws that prevent them from really joining into that second tier. But I think they're clearly the best team in that third tier just based on the fact that they have one of the top 4 players in the entire NBA. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. We'll be back on Friday with a mailbag. And then next week, we're starting this thing up. We got an NBA basketball game on Tuesday. So as always, I appreciate you guys, and we will see you on Friday.